How are you developers? I trust you're all fine. Welcome to today's class where we will unlock the power to precisely place and arrange elements on a web page using CSS positioning. CSS positioning is an essential skill for any web developer as it allows us to control the layout and presentation of content. So without much ado, let's start learning about CSS positioning. If you have been following this course, you are aware of the resources that we always fetch before every class. So you can just go to your cloned repository and use the git pull command to fetch today's notes. If you are new, I'll provide the link of the GitHub repository so that you can clone it to get today's notes. So let us dive in to learning CSS positions. So once you have pulled the changes, you can see in my VS Code I have this new folder here called 08 position, and inside the folder there's this notes. These are the notes that you're supposed to pull them. You can see all the notes are there. So I'll just create a new file here called index.html. So also create another file called style.css. Inside the HTML, I'll put my boilerplate there. Then I'll rename the title to CSS positioning. Also, I'll add a link to my style sheet. Then I'll save. I'll use my Markdown previewer to open these notes so that they can be easy to read. And with that, I'll be set. You can see I have my index.html file here, I have my CSS file here, and I have the notes on my right. These are today's notes that we'll be learning, CSS positioning. So let's start learning about the position property in CSS. So in CSS position, we learn about the different values that the position property can have. As you can see in the notes, there are 5 values that the position can have, and we look at them one by one. I'll start with the static value. So the static is the default positioning where elements flow naturally in the document. And also elements with this static positioning are not affected by the top, bottom, left or right properties. So you can see, let us look at an example of how we can use this static position in code. So I'll just create a div here. Just a div like that. I'll give that div a class of static like that. This is for the static position. I can just write a comment and say position static. We say that comments are used to document your code, so it's important for me to write comments so that I can know what I'm doing. Then here I can write a comment. I can say this div has a static position. I just soft wrap so that my content does not overflow. So yeah, I've created a div there and I've put the text, this div has a static position. Then the div has a class of static so that you can style it in CSS using the class selector like that. So here I'll put the position property and give it the value of static, and also I'll put a border so that you see how the container is 2 pixels solid. Then let me use the X value, that one, and then I'll save my code. So now let's go to the browser and see how this looks like. So if you go to the browser, you can see that our div is not positioned in any special way. It is just positioned according to the normal flow of the page. And if I try to let me use the developer options and to style this and to add some styles in this div, it's here. So if I put something like, if I say below below the border, I can add the top. Then I'll say top maybe 50 pixels. You can see the top is not being applied because the static position is not allowed to use this top, left, right values. And that is the default behavior of the static position. And I think that is clear about static. So you look at the next element, the next value of the position element, that is the relative. So let's look at the relative position. The next positioning type or the next value that the position property can have is the relative. And when an element is positioned relative, it is positioned to its normal position in the document flow, but it can be moved using the top, bottom, left, and right properties. But keep in mind, it retains its space in the document flow. That is the key thing. It always retains the space in the document flow. So let's look at this example here. I'll just write here position relative. Then I'll also get another div below it, div of class relative. This is the shortcut of creating a div that has a class of relative, or creating a div that has any class. Just write div, then dot, then the name of that class. You click and see it, div class relative, like that. So for creating that div, I'll just write here inside the div that this div I'll just copy this one. Just as a relative position, like that. Then I'll save. Then I'll go to my style sheets and style this relative class and give it a position of relative, like that. Then I'll also add a border 2 pixels, solid. Then I'll put this color 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that color, or I'll just adjust this one to it. FF. One is visible, so I'll just save and let me look at it in the browser. Then I'll change those top, left, and bottom right values in the developer options. So let's go to the browser and see how this element is. Let me zoom my browser a little bit. Now this side, you can see that our new div that has the relative position, when you look at it now, it's just similar to the one that has static, but the additional things that this relative can have is you can add the top value. Let me just show you. Let me click this div. This is the div, so I can add here below this. I can add the top value here. Let's say top, and the top value to be like 50 pixels. Then if you can see, it has moved 50 pixels from the top, and that is how you can play the position relative. So if I add, let's say, left value, if I say left value, I put something like 5 pixels. It will move 5 pixels from the left. You have seen how it has moved. Or I'll just adjust to 15 pixels so that you can see how it's moving towards the right. It's creating 15 pixel space from the left, but it still maintains the document flow. So no element can be put in this space. This space that this div has left, no other element can occupy that space because this div is still in that document flow. You can also look at the bottom. Let's say you can say a bottom, but the bottom will conflict with the top. So unless I remove the top, let's say bottom 0, then I remove this top, then you can see there's no space from the bottom. Then you can also put right. You can just put any values that you want there. Let me say 5 pixels. Then I'll say right. Instead of bottom, I'll say right. Then let me remove this left so that you can see it has moved 5 pixels from the right, that way. So that is how you can adjust the top, right, bottom, and left values of any element that is positioned relative. we saw that when it is positioned static, you cannot use these values. You saw it in static, so you can just recap. When I say static, I put the, let's say top is something like 50 pixels. You see when the developer options, it's like it's blurred. That means it's not applied. You can see this tick here is not bright like the other ones. And there's this warning here. It's saying that the position static property prevents top from having an effect. Trying setting position to something else other than static. So as long as the position is static, you can no longer set the top, right, bottom, and left value. But if you have the other positions, you can set. So that is how the static differs from the relative and the rest of the positions. So relative is similar to static, except that in relative you can add the top, left, right, and bottom values. That is it with the relative position. We changed the value in the developer option, so keep in mind that when you come to the VS Code, the values will not be applied unless you type them. I'll just put here left 30 pixels, just like that. But I think we already know how you can add the rest of the values. So the next type of positioning, or the next value that the position property can have, is fixed. And when an element is positioned fixed, it is positioned relative to the viewport, and the viewport is just the screen, where the visible part in the screen, that is called the viewport. What you can see in the screen, that is the viewport. So if you position an element to be fixed, it will be relative to the viewport, and the element will remain fixed even when the page is scrolled. So let me come here to my VS Code and I'll create a div. Let me create it on top because I want it to be fixed. No, let me create it anywhere. I'll just clear it at the below this. Say here position fixed. Then I'll create a div. I'll give it a class of fixed. Then I can write here fixed position, or yes, I'll just say fixed position. Like that. Also, we have said that when the element has a fixed position, it will remain fixed even when the page scrolls. So I want to add some text in my HTML so that the context can be more than the page, so that the page can have that scroll, so that the page can have the scroll bar at the left. This scroll bar like this. You cannot have this scroll bar if your page has some little content. Your page has to have a lot of content for it to have this scroll bar. So I'll just create a paragraph below the div, and let's say I'll copy some of these notes. I'll just copy all this. I'll copy all of those so that I can have a lot of content in my page, so that my page can have this scrolling thing here. I think that is okay. We just save. Then I'll go to the CSS and style my fixed class. Fixed. Then give it a position of fixed, and also give it a border like the rest, so that you can see how the element moves. 2 pixels solid. I'll give it just a common color, like, let me give it red, like that. So we have said that the fixed also can have the top. We have said any other position can have the top, left, right. They can have, except that the static cannot have. So this fixed can also have the top, left, right, and whatever. So I want my element to be fixed at the top right. So I'll give it a top value of 0, so that it is fixed at the top, so that it does not have space from the top, and also I'll give it a right value of 0, so that from the right it should not have any space. So let me save this code and let's go to the browser and see how this will look like. You can see that my div is here, but I put it below this other div, but it came on top here, because we said earlier that when an element is positioned fixed, it is relative to the viewport. So it is positioned according to the viewport, and I told you that the viewport is this white part you can see here. This is the viewport. So when I say top 0, I mean top from the viewport. This is the top of the viewport. So from the viewport, have a top of 0. That means it will be at the top part of my viewport. And from the right, have a right value of 0. So it will be the right side of my viewport. That is not the same while you're talking to relative. Relative, it was from where it is, give it a value of left top from where it is. But fixed is from the viewport. In fact, fixed is relative to the viewport. But this relative position was relative from its current position where it is in the document flow. That is the difference between the fixed and the relative. Fixed is relative to the viewport, while relative position is relative from its current position. So if it is relative, I put top 0, it will remain there. But fixed, I put top 0, it will be top 0 from the viewport, so it will go on top of the viewport. And that is how fixed behave. Then the additional thing about fixed is that it does not move. It will remain there. When you see if I scroll, you can see these other ones, they move with the page. But this fixed remains where it is there, even if I scroll. And that is how you can use the fixed. This fixed is applicable in many areas. Like you can see in my portfolio, I use that fixed to set the nav bar. You can see I set the nav bar. You can see this nav bar is fixed here. And when I scroll, the nav bar is still there. That is how you can use the position. That is how the position fixed is in real world application. So that is it with the position fixed. So let us look at the next position, that is position absolute. The next element, the next thing that we talk about is the position absolute. So before we talk about absolute positioning, let me tell you about what is a positioned element. When I started this class, we said that by default, all elements are positioned static. This is static. This is the default positioning of element. You can see HTML elements are positioned static by default. So when you're talking about this absolute, when an element is positioned absolute, it will be positioned relative to the nearest positioned ancestor. In short, it will look at any other element that has been positioned. And by positioning, I mean that element has a position property set to any other value except static, because static is the default one. So this absolute will look at, is there an element that has position of relative or fixed or absolute? You see, it will look at whether an element has any other position apart from static. Then it will position itself relative to that element. You have seen how the relative positioning positions itself according to where it is in the document, where it is in the current position in the document. And you have seen how the fixed positioning positions itself relative to the viewport. Now this absolute positioning positions itself relative to the nearest positioned ancestor. And another catch about this absolute position is that if an element is positioned absolute, it is removed from the normal document flow and it can overlap other elements. That is a key thing. And another thing, if in the document there's no other positioned element, it will position itself relative to the document body, and it will move along with the page scrolling. That is the catch about this absolute. So let us look at how this absolute is used in practice. Allow me to just clear this other position so that you can have some space, or let me just create it below here, but I'll just remove this paragraph because you have seen how that fixed work. Or let me just create it before this. I'll just duplicate this code and I'll say a position absolute. Absolute, like that. Then I'll call this class outer. This will be the outer. This outer div will have a position of relative, because they said that for the position absolute to work, it will look for any other positioned element. So I want this outer class to have a position of relative. So I'll just say this element has a position of relative. I'll just copy this that we wrote here and I give it here. like that. Then inside this div, I'll put another div of class absolute, like that. Then here I can say this div has a position of absolute, has absolute position, or I can say absolute position, like that. So you can see I have two divs here. There's this outer div and this inner div. The inner div is the one that I'll put up the position to be absolute. So let's go to the styles and let me style both the div. I'll just start with the outer one. The outer div, I'll give it a position of relative, as we said before, because you want this inner div that has a position of absolute to be positioned relative to this outer one. So this outer one has to have a position other than static. So the default one is static, so I want to override that static position by giving it a position of relative. That's why I've put that outer div there. I also add a width of, let's say, 200 pixels, and the height also of 200 pixels also, so that the container can be a little bit huge so that you can see it. I'll also add a border, 2 pixels solid blue, like that. Then we'll style the other, it is called absolute, and I'll give it a position of absolute, like that. Then I'll say maybe the top value to be 50 pixels, so it will have a space of 50 pixels from the top, but relative to this container. You'll see how it will behave. So I'll give it a height of 0, like that, and maybe I can add some height so that it is huge also. I'll give it a height of something like, let's say, 50 pixels. And also add the border radius for you to see the element where it starts and ends, 2 pixels solid green. I think I've not used green before. Yeah, I've not used green, so let me use green here, or I'll use this one called yellow green. So let me save and let me go to the browser so that you can see how this absolute is. So if you go to the browser, you can see that our div is here, but this one does not have a border. So let me inspect and see what the issue is. Let me just inspect the page so that I can see where the issue is with this other div. So I can see that, where is it? This one is the outer div, and the inner div is here. Oh, I put a border radius instead of border, so that was the error there. So I'll just, you can see it's red. You can just comment this border radius and leave it as border. And yeah, you can see now it's being applied there. I think that is okay. So let us focus on, let me just, I was supposed to comment this fixed. Let me just delete it here in my, let me delete it. Oh no, this is the absolute. I can't delete the absolute. Let me delete the fixed one so that I can have some space. Or let me just add some. Okay, let's just leave it like that. I'll add the top value in the outer div. Let me just add, what is that outer? Let me add a margin in the outer so that I can have some space. Margin 10 pixels. Yeah. I think now the container is outside there. You can see it. Let me zoom out. I think that it's visible there. So you can see that this blue border is our div that is relative. Then this green is a div that is absolute position. So you have seen that we put, where is it? The absolute one. We put it to have a top value of 50 pixels. So you can see the top 50 pixels from this div. It's relative. It's top 50 pixels from, and its position, it is positioned relative to this outer div. So if you say 50 pixels, it will be 50 pixels top from the top of this div. Then if you say right 0, it will be right from this div, because I've said that the position absolute, when you give it some values, it will look at an ancestor element that is positioned. So in this case, this our element, this div has position of relative. But if there's no element that is positioned, for example, if I remove this, where is it, this outer, I just click on here to remove this positioning, you can see that now my absolute element is positioned relative to the body. So it will be 50 pixels top from the body. So from this body, what is this? All of this document is the body, the visible part. So it will be 50 pixels from here and right here. So you can see how this relative position relative has some effect. So if you put it position relative, it will be the absolute will be 50 pixels from this div, and that is how the position relative, that is how the position absolute is. And you have seen that this position absolute, it can overlap other elements. Like here, it is on top of this element. It is not inside here, it is on top, because we said that the position absolute, this one, let me say, and to show you that it is on top of this. So if I say something like, let's say 150, okay, that is too much. You can see here it overlaps this other one, because this div is not in the normal document flow, it's on top of the other ones. That is how we say that the absolute, if you position an element to be absolute, it will be taken out of the normal document flow. So that means it can overlap other elements. Because if I put, let's say, top 200, because I've seen there's a paragraph there, let me just put this top to be 200. Now 200 is still small, let me put 250. I think 250 is okay. Let me scroll. You can see this div is now on top of this other element, so it has overlapped them. And that is why we say that when when an element is positioned absolute, it is taken out of the document flow, so that it will act like there's no other elements here, so it will just move on top of them. And that is the default behavior of the position absolute. So I think it is clear, and I'll talk about the next position, that is position sticky. The other value of the position property is this value called sticky. But this sticky is a little bit new, and some browsers might not support it. But if you have something like Google Chrome or the Firefox, I think yours will be okay. But the other browsers, I'm not sure. But I'll show you how to make it be supported in other browsers. You can see here, the Internet Explorer does not support sticky. And there's also some other browsers that do not support sticky, but we'll use this WebKit prefix to see how we can use sticky to some other browsers like Safari. If you're using Safari, you have to use this WebKit prefix, but I'll show you how to use it. Before we learn how to use it, let us just learn what is sticky first. So sticky position, I'll say it's a hybrid position, because it is a mixture of both relative and fixed. We saw how relative is, and we saw how fixed is. So sticky is a mixture of the two. When you position an element to be sticky position, it will just behave like a relative element. That means it will have the top, left, right values, and it will move according to the document flow. When you scroll the page, it will scroll. But when it reaches the offset of a viewport, when it's about to get out of the viewport, it will stick. So when it's about to get out of the viewport, it will behave like position fixed. It will stick on top of the viewport, so that it cannot get out of the viewport. That is how sticky behaves. So without talking too much, let me just create a div. I'll just create that div below the. I'll just create it here. No, I'll just create it below the absolute, because this paragraph is too huge. Let me just copy this one. Let me just copy that and paste it here like that. I'll rename this to. I'll just double cursor here. Then I'll say position sticky like that. Then I'll also name this to sticky position. And I think this one is causing a nuisance, so I'll just comment it. Which one also? I think it's just that. I'll just comment that only because it's the only one that was causing a nuisance, but it does not affect our. I just want to have some space so that you can see the effect easily. So I've created the div. I'll also go to my CSS here and I'll sell that class of sticky. I'll give it a position called sticky. I've said that this sticky some browsers do not support. So I'll just, if your browser does not support, mine supports, so I'll just say position sticky. If yours does not support, before the position sticky, you have to put this thing. You have to put position, then you put something called that WebKit sticky. So you'll have two values of position. You put position WebKit sticky, then you put position sticky. That is if your browser does not support, but if yours supports, you can just use just position sticky. Then I'll put the top value to be 0. Also I'll put a border 2 pixels. You can see I put border radius. Let me just delete this one to remain to be border like that. 2 pixels solid. Then which color should I use? Which color have I not used? Purple. I think that is okay. So that is it with the sticky. I think that is all that is required for me to write. So we'll go to the browser and see how this sticky is. So if you go to the browser, you can see that our element is here. We put it to have a top of 0 and right. Why is it sticky? Where is our sticky? It's here. You put it to have you can see mine. This one is exclamation because it did not apply to my browser, because my browser supports. Because this one is complaining. You can see it's exclamation, and however you can say invalid property value. You're supposed to use this one if your browser does not support the sticky one, but mine supports, so this one is like an error to my browser. So I put a top value of 0 alone. So this element here, you can use it like this stick is similar to the relative, because if I put here left, something like left 5 pixels, it will move 5 pixels from the left, and that is how it works. It just looks like the relative. But when we start to scroll, you can see it flows with the normal document flow. But when it reaches the viewport of when it reaches the offset viewport, when it's about to leave the viewport, it sticks there. So you can see it's no longer moving. That's why we say that this one is a hybrid position. It acts like, you can see when it's here, it acts like a relative position. It's similar to the relatives, and it just moves. When it reaches the top, you say the top, it should have a top value of 0, so it remains top 0. It does not move anymore. So if I scroll, you can see the element scrolls, but the sticky position remains there. And that is how you can use the sticky. I think that is it with the sticky, because if you have understood the position fixed and position relative, you already know what position sticky is. It's just a mixture of the two. So that is it with the sticky. So I'll have an additional content of talking about the z-index property. There's this thing called z-index, because I've said when an element is positioned absolute, this element, sometimes it can overlap other elements. So the z-index, we'll talk about when two elements overlap, which element should be on top of the other. So to define which element should be on top of the other, you'll use the z-index property. So let's look at how the z-index property works. You can see here in the notes that the z-index property, when elements are positioned, they can overlap other elements. And the z-index property specifies the stack order of an element. In short, it specifies which element should be on top of the other element. It specifies which element should be on top and which element should be behind if two elements overlap. So you can put the z-index value to have either positive or negative values. But for an element to be on top, it has to have a higher z-index value than the other element for it to be on top. So an element with a higher z-index value will be on top of an element with a lower z-index value. And by default, all elements have a z-index value of 1. I think that is clear. So I want to put an image, then I want to put some text on top of that image. So let me first search my image, then I'll come back when I have the image in my browser. Hello, I searched for images in my computer. I only found that I have this one image and it's just my image, so I'll just use this image if it's okay with you. So I want to put an image, then I want to put some text in that image. So how that will work is I'll have some, let me put it here after the sticky. I just comment and say the index property. So this the index is a different property. It's not a value of the, it's not among the values of the property elements. This is a different property altogether. It's used to define which element can be on top of the other. So it's mostly used when you use the absolute value for the position. Because when you put an element to be absolute, it will be out of the document flow and it will overlap other elements. So if you use absolute and maybe some elements overlap each other, you can use the z index value to specify which element should be on top of the other. So I'll just put my image here. Just put image like that. So my image will have a source / then profile png. Then the image, it's important for you to put an alt attribute when you use an image. So in case the image does not show, does not show, this text will display. Okay. Then below the image I'll put a paragraph. Okay, I think this paragraph is here. I'll just modify this paragraph. Instead of writing a new paragraph, I'll just use the existing paragraph, but I'll just put it to have one line of just a single line, not that whole thing. Then put this text in front. So I want this text to be in front of that image. I wrote this text in front. So I'll go to my styles, and below the sticky I can style my image. I'll just use the element selector like that because I only have one image and I did not put the class in that image, so I'll just use the element selector. Then I can put the image to have a position of absolute like that. Then I want it to have it will be absolute relative to what? And let me just comment all the codes, or I'll just delete all these codes. All these codes and to delete them, so that I can only have this z index alone. That means I'll also delete all this stuff because this z index I want it to be alone, because I want to position this to have a top of 0. I want this image to be at the top 0. Then I want it to be at the top right, so I'll put right 0. So that the image can be in the top right. Then let me leave it like that. Then I can, let me style the paragraph. Let me style the paragraph to have a color. I think color of which color is visible. I think this one is the shouting color. That is visible. Then maybe font size large. That. So let me go to the browser and see how these elements will behave. So if you go to the browser, you can see that the text is here, the image is here. I think I misplaced the image. Let me put the image and the image to be this side. So instead of right 0, I'll put left 0. Left. So that the image can be this side, yeah. And the image to be this side. Also the text. Let me push the text. Where is that text? So you have seen that this image, you have said that if you position anything to be absolute, it will be taken out of the document flow. So you can see this text completely ignores the image. It acts as if the image is not there, because you can see where is that paragraph. Let me look at that paragraph. You can see this paragraph. You can see it's on top of that image. And if I write some more content here, where is that? If I edit this, yes, it's edited. If I put some content here, let me say paste something, I'm not sure what I write some things. I write some text there. You can see that text it's behind the image. It's like this image is on top of that text. Let me just give it a margin so that you can see it in action. Margin top, margin top, margin top, margin top. Margin top, let's say something like 100 pixels. Okay, also let's say something like 500 pixels, so that will come somewhere here. And also the font size to be extra large, so XX large, like that. So I think you can see how this one behaves. You can see the text is here and the image is acting like it is in front of that text. So the image is on top of that text, because I've said that when you position an element to be absolute, it can overlap other elements. Now this image has overlapped my text. So now someone cannot read this text because the text is behind the image. So to solve this issue is where that's where the Z index comes about. So you have said by default all elements have a Z index of 1. And you can put Z index and have both positive values and negative values. So for me to solve this issue, the Z index value of the text has to be greater than the Z index value of the image. So one solution is to put the paragraph to have a Z index value of, let's say, something like 2. So if it has a Z index value of 2, it will be, it cannot be put 2 there, it has refused. Why is it refusing? It says position static. Oh, you can't put Z index if the position is static. So unless I put this position relative, forgot position relative. Yeah, you can see if I put here the index of 2, let me just apply it. You can see if I put here the paragraph to have the index of 2, you can see that the paragraph is coming in front of the image. Now the image will be behind the. That is the first solution. The other solution is that you can put the image towards the index value of -1. So both of those can work, as long as the text to have a higher the index value than the image. Is when the text can come in front of the image. And you have seen that you cannot put the index value to an element that is not positioned. So for you to use the index, you have to first position your element before you can use this index property. So the index is used when the other element is positioned. You can see mine is relative. That's why you can see when I remove this one will refuse. It's telling me that because I said by default the element has a static position. You say that the static position prevents the index from having an effect. So you have to put a position of anything other than static, and I chose relative for the index to work. Also, you can also put, where's that image? Instead of putting the index value of 2, you can go to the image and put the index value of the image, the index value to be something like -1. So if the image has an index of -1, I can just remove the index in the paragraph. Can just remove it, and still the text will be on top of the image, because now the image has an index value of -1. That means that the text has a higher index value than the image, because you said that by default all elements have the index value of 1. So if you put -1 in the index value of the image, the text will have an index value of 1, and the image will have the index value of -1. And that is how you use the index value. So that is it for today, guys. See you in the next class. Peace out.